It's that how the chemicals getting from the south side of the landfill, the south side of the landfill to the north side of the landfill in other wells, but these wells don't show it. That's the question.
Correct. I do understand that. I guess what I'm trying to relay is that the DADS monitoring network may not answer that question, because the DADS monitoring network was not put in to answer that question. And so to the extent that the CAG asked for information on the DADS monitoring network, I'm giving you what we have. If there are data gaps for Lowry landfill that can't be addressed by the DADS monitoring network, that's sort of a different issue.
This is Bonnie.
I would just say that we understand that.
Yes. And John, thank you. You clarified it very well. And what we do want to know is what can we do to find out how we can get data from what's happening in DADS.
Again, the DADS report we can send you, but it is only going to give you primarily non-detect data for these wells that I have on this map, because that's all they're only sampling these wells, and they're only sampling for the constituents in this table that I sent over. So they're not looking for 1,4-dioxane, so that isn't going to provide any additional data beyond what you already have for Lowry landfill.
I got you, Colleen, and I'm sorry. You're so new to this that I know this is difficult for you to explain to all of us, but we would like to know the MDL of the chemicals in the DADS landfill that may be traveling along the Murphy Creek drainage. And if DADS isn't monitoring for that, we need to know how that piece of puzzle is missing from the Superfund study. So I think we're going to have to do something else at a future meeting to satisfy this request, and we'll have to think about and talk about what that might be.
So let me interject here. This is Janine. And Steve Richtel, you had something to add to this?
Sorry, I had to take my phone off of mute. Yeah, Bonnie, there are wells, monitoring wells, monitored by the Superfund program between the north boundary barrier wall and Yale. There's quite a few wells. They're monitored for very low level 1,4-dioxane analysis that clearly show the pathway for that chemical from Section 6 to Yale. It's a very narrow sand channel that is monitored both north-south, east-west, and vertically.
I appreciate that information, Stephen. We'd like to see it. And we'd like to see more updated information than what we got recently. And I think we need to have a conversation about this because we're confused by how this reporting system is being done. I know that solid waste is under different rules than hazardous waste or Superfund. However, there is a plume coming off of Section 6, and it is at Yale, and we'd just like to know what is happening at Section 31.
I understand. I tried to explain that to you. Every 6 months, you get a report that includes maps that depict the sampling done in Section 31 where DADS exists that show the outline of the 1,4-dioxane plume.
It's my understanding when the offsite plume was first discovered at MW77 and everybody started chasing it, Waste Management in Denver started chasing it, that is part of the process. But it's not just 1,4-dioxane we're concerned about. And so we'd like to know what that monitoring has shown and why there's no information guiding us. It just seems to end at Section 6 and begin on Yale at the end of Section 31. We'd just like to discuss that more and see more information regarding that monitoring.
I appreciate that. And as you know, in 2018, a very comprehensive sampling program was done that did not just include 1,4-dioxane, it included a very long list of chemicals, including those wells in section 31 where DADS exists, and nothing was found above the groundwater performance standards other than 1,4-dioxane.
Okay, well, I think that's all great, Steve, and we could see some documentation to that and some recent documentation. We'd really appreciate it.
An investigation report.
Okay.
Colleen, do you have more?
I did. Let me get back over to the figures just to see the figures and tables, just to see if there are other questions. So I was showing you the... Yes?
What was that?
I thought somebody was started to talk.
I did. It's Margie Sobey.
Yes.
Before you move on, let me see if I understand this. Nothing above groundwater standard was found. And I guess I'll make a statement is, even though nothing above the groundwater standard was found, it doesn't mean those chemicals aren't there. It just means they don't meet that standard. Is that accurate?
So in all but 3 wells, there has been nothing detected. In 3 of the wells, there have been a handful of detections, but most of the time it's non-detect, and the few times that they found or they detected any volatile organics, they've been below the groundwater standards. So most of the wells, there are no detections at all.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. I just want to point out for those on the video, there's one more portion of the tables that I wanted to point out. It's table 3-6, and that gives you the specific well construction details, depth to groundwater, length of the screen, whether or not the well is active. And then in the naming convention, I did want to point out that there are 2 letters after each well. The first letter tells you what formation it's in. So A for alluvium, W for weathered, and they're all the Dawson. The weathered will all be in the Dawson. And then the D stands for down gradient. The U stands for up gradient. So most of the wells are what are considered down gradient of the landfill mass at DADS. And there are a few wells that are considered up gradient of the landfill mass or the liner system. So that's what the naming convention is for their wells. So hopefully that's not too confusing. And again, we will send a link out to the most recent groundwater monitoring report for DADS. So you can see the data for yourself, but they really are not detecting any issues with the liner system, which is the purpose of their monitoring program, is to verify there are no releases from their liner system.
Colleen, this is Bonnie again, and I understand what you're saying, but we aren't interested in the liner system. We know that the landfill was built very well. I personally know how it was constructed, and I do believe it's well done. We aren't interested in the liner system. We're interested in what's flowing under the liner system and through DADS.
Okay, I understand.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Colleen, did you have any more to present?
That's all I have, is unless there are any other questions.
Any other questions for Colleen? Okay, so we'll move right along then. Steve Richtel from Waste Management will present some information about the Molly question.
Yeah, and thank you for that. But I'm going to take you out of Molly for a minute, and while I have this pulpit, I want to make you aware of a couple things related to COVID and the Superfund side. On a couple occasions over the past few months, a member of CAG has approached our water treatment plant operating contractor. While we could have a debate about the appropriateness of that this evening, that is not my message to you tonight. In this critical time when social distancing is so important, we cannot allow anyone to visit, potentially contaminating the plant or equipment. If access or a tour is desired, please go through the normal communication channels. We simply cannot put our operators at risk. That's point number one. Number two, speaking of Corona, we have been this week deeply examining the critical operations at this site to prevent, as much as humanly possible, interruptions in operations. We have contingency plans now in place in case our water treatment plant or landfill gas operators or sampling teams become ill, if there are disruptions or elimination of critical supply chain support, such as a chemistry lab, and even plans in place to make sure that reports get submitted when access to office support is compromised. If shelter in place is put into effect, we consider that what our operators do to be an essential function, and they should be allowed to travel to and from the site to do their job. So that's it for my pulpit. We can move on to molybdenum now. The water treatment plant effluent is sampled quarterly for compliance with the plant's discharge permit. Moly is one of over 100 chemicals routinely sampled from the discharge from the plant. It is not considered by CDPHE a regulated contaminant. Moly was not included in Lowry's groundwater monitoring program because when site groundwaters were sampled in the RI, the maximum from non-source areas was 40 micrograms per liter, which is less than half of the Colorado domestic use standard of 210. Moly is in the permit because it has a local limit. The current permit, which became effective January 5 and runs through January 4, 2025, has an allowable maximum concentration of 430 micrograms per liter. The prior permit had two limits. It had both a concentration limit of 430 and a mass limit of 0.155 pounds per day. I'm going to show you now, see if this works. Hopefully it'll work better than I could see Colleen, because I couldn't see anything. Colleen.
Folks who are only on the phone, this information was emailed out at the beginning of this call. So you should have it in your emails if you can access it.
What I have on my
Okay, this is Bonnie, and our power just came back on, and we can probably access it now, but I'm going to stay with where I'm at because it's really difficult to hear Steve. Is there any way we can have a breakdown of what he said because it's so muffled it was breaking up?
Yes, unfortunately. I just tried to move my computer so you can hear me better. I'm disconnected from my screen. There we go. Is this any better, Bonnie?
I don't know. It really is kind of muffled. It's like you're talking through a pipe. I would like to clearly understand what you were saying, and it's an important subject. So
my computer,
I don't know what
my computer speaker is not the best. I tried to do this via phone, and all it did was echo. What's on the screen, for those of you who hopefully can hear me, are pages from our discharge permit. This is page 5, showing you the maximum allowable concentrations of metals and for radionuclides. Continues on to page 6. This page 7 is the frequency at which we have to monitor for all of these parameters. And you'll notice that it says volatile organics listed in Appendix D. This is Appendix D. And there are numerous pages here for the long list of things that the effluent from the water treatment plant gets tested for quarterly. Historically, Molly has been fairly consistent in the water treatment plant effluent at between about 10 and 50 micrograms per liter versus the discharge standard of 430. After we stopped injecting water in October 2018, we began noticing that molybdenum was increasing in the effluent. When we received results in October of 2019, 1 year later, of 340, we began sampling all the influence sources to the water treatment plant to see if we could identify the source. We took individual samples from the north boundary burial wall, from the north toe extraction system, from MW38 sand channel, from the well we call the MW38 source well. We took samples from the slurry wall gradient control wells, from the MW77 area, from the north end off-site, from the well that we extract from just north of the north boundary burial wall, which I'm going to show you this on a map, and also at depth. In addition, due to the elevating molybdenum, we increased the sampling frequency of plant effluent to weekly. Those results showed that nearly all the molybdenum was coming from one extraction point, known as MW113EW extraction well. On November 15th, lab results from the effluent that were collected on November 5 showed that the discharge exceeded the 430 standard. We immediately notified Metro and EPA, and the plant was shut down. At that time, that well, MW113, had been extracting groundwater at a rate of about 3 gallons a minute. Through calculations, we were able to prove that if extraction was decreased from 3 to 1 gallon a minute, compliance with the permit could be achieved. Those calculations were shared with Metro on November 18th. Metro approved the modification that day, and the plant was restarted. Then, while not required and in an abundance of caution, sampling has continued weekly to monitor for changes. In addition, to see how widespread the moly occurs near that well, we sampled surrounding monitoring wells. That well is constructed in a 55-foot deep boring. It's completed in the sand with 30 feet of well screen from 20 to 50 feet below ground. And clay was found in the boring both above and below the screened interval. I'm now going to show you, and this is still draft. It will be coming in your status report by the end of the month. These are water levels around the north boundary barrier wall in October of 2019. This is 1 year after we stopped injecting. Hopefully you can see this. The linear feature that runs from the left to the right is the north boundary barrier wall. The 3 green dots in the middle of the figure are the location of where the injection wells were that was suspended in 2018. Extraction well 113 is the purple dot just above the furthest right green dot. You'll also notice now some areas that have some diagonal hashers through them. This is a map of groundwater levels in the weathered Dawson. Those areas with the diagonal hashing are now dry because of not injecting anymore. This area is becoming dewatered. What these lines depict are places where equal groundwater elevation occurs. So if you were to pick up any one of these lines, everywhere along it, and were to measure what the elevation of the groundwater is, it would be equal. What you're seeing around extraction well 113 is a deeper area than the surrounding area, meaning that there's a cone of depression that has been created by our extraction from MW 113 EW1. You see similar cones of depression around 77, and also to the area that's on the right of the north boundary barrier wall. Again, those are caused.
To our meeting, but we're getting through the agenda really quick. So it's like, so that's not bad at all. And if
I
we
think
can
somebody has their line not muted. Or was that a question?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Now, as I told you, so MW 113, the one with the high molybdenum, so we wanted to find out how widespread it was, so we went and sampled other wells. This map shows the most recent molybdenum results that we have received. It shows you the date of the sample. And oddly, or maybe it's terrific, the only well in the area with elevated molybdenum is that extraction well. It's pretty clear that ceasing injection significantly lowered the water table in the sand. Has increased as the water level. This graph, which I hope you can see, the bottom line here, the orange with the dots on it, is the molybdenum concentration in the effluent from the water treatment plant. The vertical dashed line that is on the left side of it is when injection stopped. So you can see that when injection stopped, molybdenum rapidly began to increase at the water treatment plant. The next line is when, next vertical line is when we decreased the extraction from at 113 from 3 gallons a minute to 1 gallon a minute. And hopefully you can see the concentrations in the plant effluent have fallen. The other thing that is plotted here are groundwater elevations in wells very near to 113. It has MW 113 on there, as well as 2 other wells located very near to it. And I think it's pretty obvious that the decreasing water levels and the molybdenum concentration increase are somehow related to each other. At this point, we're trying to find out what the source of the moly is. We have a few hypotheses that we've considered, and most of them have been eliminated, don't seem to make sense. First one is, was it from waste buried in the landfill? Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, groundwater from shallow and deep wells between the landfill and this area are in the 1 to 100 parts per billion range, so that's not likely the source. Was it from the sewage sludge that was land farmed in that area? We have 2 wells in the known land farmed area. The concentration of moly in those wells is in the range of 2 to 12. We also collected a sample of visibly landfilled sludge and had it analyzed. And the moly concentration into it was very close to the groundwater protection standard. So that's probably not the source of elevated moly. Or was it induced by humans, such as lubricants from the drill stem or from the sampling equipment or anything like that? None of the equipment we use contain moly, so that's probably not the source. Well, another hypothesis is it's naturally occurring, because we know geology tells us that molybdenum is associated with some minerals like pyrite or shale. So we have just pulled the core boxes from drilling of 113 and are having samples analyzed by X-ray fluorescence to determine the metals concentration. If any are high, they'll then be analyzed using X-ray diffraction to determine the minerals present. The source of the molybdenum can then be inferred by the presence of minerals known to host molybdenum, such as iron monosulfide, pyrite, and molybdenite. That's where we're at. We are in compliance. We have one well that exceeds the groundwater performance standard and nothing around it. It's an isolated thing. So, are there any questions?
Steve, I have a question, just a clarification.
Yes.
Because I can't hear you very well, but I'm trying to follow what you're saying here. Are you saying that the only place that molybdenum shows up is in the injection wells?
No, I'm saying it's only in an extraction well.
So, but there's like four or five of them that show it.
Yes, they have it, but not at the elevated concentrations.
Does it show, does the map you have up right there show the concentration? Like I'm looking at 7,600.
Yes, look at, on the right-hand side, MW113EW1, March 3rd, 2020, molybdenum 7,600.
So when I look over at I'm confused because I look over at this attachment to the email you sent, and it says molybdenum allowable maximum is 0.43, and then you're showing us map 7,600.
Right, but you have to understand that's not the only influence stream to the water treatment plant.
Well,
We're getting 1 gallon a minute out of that well.
And Steve, I think the units are different on your table and your map, correct?
Probably, yes. I think in the permit they're in milligrams per liter.
Right, one of them is milligrams per liter and one of them is micrograms per liter. So there's a 1,000 difference there as well.
Yeah,
So
I got it. I got it. Okay.
And again, we're pulling 1 gallon a minute out of that well. We're pulling 10 gallons a minute out of the north boundary barrier well.
Okay. I get that they're different levels. It doesn't say that, but I get that they are.
So I have a question. This is Margie Sobey. I understand that you've said you're in compliance, and the statement was, this is where we are now. So I guess I took that as meaning we're not do anything else because we are in compliance. And I could be assuming that incorrectly, but I'm just wondering, is there going to continue to be monitoring to see if this increases at some point?
Yes, we continue to take samples from this well. And as I said, we're trying to figure out whether this is a naturally occurring phenomenon or not.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Bonnie. I have one question. Have you been in touch with Shattuck to find out, are they trying to investigate this as well to see if it's related to their disposal out there?
No, we have not been. And I know Tom had this question about radioactivity as well. There are 7 different forms of molybdenum. none of which are radioactive. There is radioactive moly used in medical imaging, as I'm sure Tom very well knows. I don't think that technology was in existence at the time that the landfill existed. And plus, we don't see it anywhere between the landfill and here.
Stephen, I'm trying to reconcile my thoughts around what Shattuck disposed of downtown Denver and tried to leave it there and covered, and it was radioactive, and I'm just wondering if this is any relationship to that.
I don't have any way to know that, Bonnie.
Hello, this is Tom Kraus. I wonder if I could ask a question.
Absolutely, go for it. I think we lost Lisa. She'll be back.
Okay. You could not identify a migratory pathway. Is that true?
Wells, left, right, up, down, around it are clean. They're not elevated. We think we have a very isolated pool of highly elevated molybdenum, and we are speculating, we won't know until we get the results, that there's a lot of pyrite in the core and that it's leaching into the groundwater.
You mean the core of the...
From the boring, from the natural material.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
When we drill wells, we bring up a core sample that shows what the geology that's been removed is. That core is placed into core boxes and stored for future reference. We have gone and pulled some of the core out and have taken samples of it and have sent it to the laboratory for analysis. The geologist's description of the material that was in that core has the words pyrite throughout it. It's possible that pyrite is leaching under natural conditions into the groundwater that we're extracting.
And if you don't find it there, where else are you going to look?
That's a very good question, Tom. We haven't seen it anywhere else. Again, we don't sample it. It's not part of the Lowry Superfund site sampling program because during the RI, it wasn't found in high concentrations.
But it is still a contaminant of concern for the state.
No, it's not.
For the state.
No, it's not.
Safe groundwater standard is 160 micrograms per liter.
That's correct.
And you're above that.
In one well, yes.
Okay. So at one point you're saying that you're gonna, if it doesn't continue to go up, then you're gonna quit monitoring for it.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay.
I said we are continuing to monitor.
Right. So you continue no matter whether or not it goes up or goes down because you want to make sure that you know if it's there. And if it's there, you want to also make sure that it doesn't go anywhere else.
Correct.
Okay.
And if
Presently,
the 5-year review program ever gets to the point, continued extraction from this area is one of the things that needs to be evaluated using the groundwater model and the optimization process. We haven't been able to get there.
okay. This well is within the protective site boundary?
I don't know what a protective site boundary is.
Well, maybe I'm not using the right term. Is it within the Lowry landfill Superfund site?
No.
Okay.
You look this figure, it is north of the north boundary barrier wall by a couple hundred feet. What is shown in yellow on this map is the area that we believe we still have containment of north of the wall, even without injection. Largely caused by extraction from this well.
Okay. Do you have molybdenum elsewhere within the Lowry landfill Superfund site?
Again, Tom, we don't sample for it.
You don't know if it was ever deposited there?
I don't know about the word deposited. I know that when the RI was done, the groundwater wells that were used for the remedial investigation sampled for molybdenum. It was detected, but at nowhere near these concentrations.
Is the state then concerned about the finding of moly at 26.9 times above the groundwater quality standard?
This is Colleen. I'm going to try to field that one. The state groundwater standards are obviously something that we are concerned about from the state standpoint. However, if it's shown to be naturally occurring, then the standards wouldn't really apply. We have this issue with arsenic all the time, where you have naturally occurring formations that cause exceedances of groundwater standards, but it's not because of releases, it's because of the formation.
Okay.
So we will wait and see what the WSDs find out. If it ends up being from the formation, then the groundwater standards really wouldn't apply.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Marty Sobey. I'm sure I don't have a good understanding of this, but as just a resident out here, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if something bad shows up, nobody's concerned about it. It came from a natural source. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, but there are things that we have regulatory authority over and things that we don't. So again, I want to use arsenic as an example. So arsenic we have high arsenic in a lot of areas in Colorado. And as long as it's not something that you're ingesting, then there really isn't a concern. If you put in a domestic well into a formation with high arsenic, then it's something that you as the well owner would be responsible for taking care of. If a municipal water system put in a well in a formation with high arsenic, the municipal water system would be responsible. But there wouldn't be a company that would be responsible for the high arsenic because it was already in the ground before the well was put in. It wasn't from a release from human activity, it was because the formation's there. So if this molybdenum is due to the natural formation, then yes, we would certainly want to make sure nobody was drinking it. Luckily here, there are no wells right in this area, but it also wouldn't be expected to be present outside of this area. And I think the data is showing that it is very isolated. So while it might be present, it doesn't appear to be an issue that anybody's going to be exposed to.
So even though we know that a plume has leached north of the Superfund site, we don't believe that that moly is going to be leaching right along with it, or are we not testing the plume?
Again, it sounds, based on the data, like the presence of molybdenum in this area might be naturally occurring and not related to the Superfund site. It's still under investigation, but if that's the case, then you really can't look at the Superfund site plume connected at all to molybdenum. They're not going to be co-located. It just happens that because there are so many wells in this area and they're removing water, that they've detected something. Again, if it's shown to be naturally occurring, then it really isn't an issue that is associated with the Superfund site. If the data shows something else, then we'll have to deal with it, but it's too early to tell at this point. But the fact that they've sampled so many wells around and not seen anything near the one well, it does appear to be isolated.
Okay, I understand what you're telling me, and I'll just make a statement, and then I'm going to mute my mic again. That's not very comforting to me as just a person living out here. I don't really care who's going to be responsible for it or where it came from. My concern is when something like this happens and it's naturally occurring, that still could be a problem for me as an individual, and I'm just kind of, well, actually, I'm kind of horrified that nobody, if it's naturally occurring, nobody's going to take responsibility for it. Thank you.
This is Tom Kraus again. Could I ask another question?
Yeah, Tom, can you speak up a little?
Yeah, this is Tom Kraus again. Can I ask another question?
Yes.
If that moly is actually if you find that it's naturally occurring, and as a result of, and this is an assumption, as a result of the freshwater injection into the ground by that well, you now have you know the volume of fresh water you were injecting, you know the level of the molybdenum before it started increasing. Now that this fresh water is gone and the molybdenum is going up, can you use that information in order to determine how much the plume, the contaminants in the plume, were diluted by the freshwater injection?
I'm thinking, Tom. Potentially, yes, but I don't really know that's, well, I understand why you would want that answer. For us as the site operators, we have to extract from this well, regardless of whether it has moly in it or not. This was installed to try to alleviate the contamination in the compliance well that's nearby it. When we get to the capture zone analysis or whatever whatever terms you want to call that, I don't want to get into that argument. We will, the whole point of that is to determine is the north boundary barrier well capturing everything? And then the follow-on question is, if it is, what do you do about the horses that are out of the barn, so to speak? That is work that we're dying to get to but, and I've submitted all the reports to support getting there, but we can't get past the discussion over the reports.
I guess maybe I can make it clearer if I point out that there were several wells beyond the north boundary barrier wall that had increasing amounts of 1,4-dioxane after the cessation of potable water injection.
That is true.
And those increasing amounts, as I understand, haven't been determined why they're increasing, and they may actually create a problem in the future for a new plume to continue going south. And they will if they're continue to be at very high levels. And I'm trying to find out a way to know what we're going to have, what we're going to look at the future, or whatever we're actually looking at now as a problem for a new plume developing.
Yeah, and Tom, I appreciate exactly what you're saying. We share your concern. And the only way to get to an answer for the questions that you have is for the agencies to give us the green light to start evaluating the extraction systems using the model.
Can you explain how evaluation of the extraction systems in the water?
Yes, that's exactly what you've been pushing for us to be do things in compliance with EPA's guidance. That's what we've tried to do. But we are stuck in a do loop over words.
How can we get beyond that?
Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions? I apologize, I lost my connection earlier when I was trying to wrap things up, and then I got back on and we were in questions again. So I want to make sure there's no more questions.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I do have a comment. Are we getting ready to adjourn the meeting?
I think so, unless Bonnie
Okay.
or the CAG has additional information.
I just have a comment. The first agenda item was EPA site update, and Linda referred to the north end barrier wall report, for lack of a better term. I think everybody knows what we're talking about. And she said that she got comments from the state of Colorado and from the CAG team and had responded to those comments. Does anybody have any questions? And I don't necessarily have any questions, but I don't want, because the questions are before her, always have been, still are, and never been answered. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, at least from this CAG member, I don't have questions, I'm waiting for answers. And silence doesn't mean that her responses are accepted by the CAG and everything's okay, let's move on. Regarding the north boundary, you know, the 3D, the conceptual model, all of that information is poorly laid out and responded to with our questions. And so we're waiting for answers. We don't want to ask any more questions. We're waiting for answers to the questions that we've had. Some of them have been lingering for years. And so I just want to let that be on the record. Thank you.
So this is Steve Wharton. Let me just try to clarify a little bit. What Linda was asking, if there were questions about, was the process for moving ahead to provide you with that information that you just mentioned. And we're working with the state, and you know, everyone has weighed in on the report, and we've met with the state, and we have more discussions to have with them and then we'll circle back and sit down with everyone together to go through those. So I just wanted to clarify that we weren't saying that we felt like we had provided you what you had asked for, that we don't believe that at all at this point. But we're still working toward that goal, and that's all I wanted to offer.
Okay, I understand that, and thanks for sharing that with me. Obviously, you can hear frustration in my voice. I think the strain on us is that a lot of times we ask questions, and then there comes a united front from everyone who is responding to that question, be it the EPA, the state of Colorado, the work settling defendants, whatever it is. The CAG can ask questions, and then it all goes behind the curtain, and then the curtain suddenly opens, and everybody's in agreement with the answer, whether the CAG is happy or not. Here you go. You can take your pill or not. Nothing's going to change from this point on, and that's the scary part about all this for us, because we can't see what's going on. We hear you say, yeah, let's run behind the curtain. We'll get back with you, and that's the way it's been for a long time. And so that's where the angst lies. At least with me, I can't speak for all the CAG, but at least for me, that's where it lies. So thank you for that response, and I guess we'll look forward to hearing what you have to say. It would be nice if along the way, when you had those meetings, we could be a part of that dialogue rather than just read your conclusions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Bonnie, did you have anything else for this agenda tonight?
Bonnie's battery died on her computer. And at this point, it looks like she didn't have any more questions.
Okay.
So I would poll the rest of the CAG and see what their thoughts are.
Okay. Rest of the CAG, did you have anything else for tonight's agenda?
This is Tom Kraus. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that at the early part of the meeting where we were discussing the dads, we need to probably put on for the next board meeting, and we can discuss it further if, I'm not doing this independently, is that there is a plume that's being shown on the maps from the Lowry Landfill Superfund site that goes about halfway through section 31, disappears for a period, or as it goes from north to south, reappears within the area 31 in Dad's landfill, and then continues on down to Yale. It seemed to be come up that there are Superfund site wells that are picking up that plume, not the Dad's wells. And we'd like more information about those, how deep those wells are, where they're located. And one of the things that would help us tremendously is if we would get reporting that is not just to the PQL level, but also down to the method detection level, the MDL. And when you have a Superfund site, part of the cleanup or part of the map of the site is supposed to show not just the PQL, but also show the MDL boundaries, so that you have a good idea of where everything is. And then when you have some kind of extraction well is trying to suck that up and treat it, which is a pump and treat system, no matter what you call it, that's part of the definition. Then you have a better idea of whether that system is working. And in the three-dimensional model, what would help us also is if you showed us the arrows as well as the length of the arrow to say how fast it's going, the water movement, so we can see how that well, those contaminants, MDL and PQL, are being drawn towards the extraction well and prevented from forming a new plume. All of that information to us would help tremendously. And so I'm asking for that for the next meeting. Bonnie and I will talk further, and so will the CAG, and we can clarify that kind of information, but I just kind of want to put it up front.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, then I believe that we will adjourn the meeting unless there's any objections or additional comments.
Thank you. Great meeting.
Thank you all for your patience for all the technical difficulties. We'll be doing this or something similar at the next meeting, so stand by for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Good night,
Jim.
everybody.
Great job, Lisa and Janine.
Thank you, folks, for your participation tonight. Be well, stay healthy.
That's right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.